Today on the Big 3 in 30, the Packers hope to be Super Bowl contenders this season.
We're going to talk about the best case scenario for the Packers, the worst case scenario for the Packers.
The Patriots think they're underrated in some offseason rankings.
Apparently 2025 in this past offseason meant nothing to a certain prediction model.
And the Cowboys hope their defensive line has the power to dominate.
We are previewing the defensive tackle position.
This is the Big 3 in 30 NFL, the three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 in 30 NFL starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 in 30 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. Jordan Love and the Packers want to play like a team that can push into the Super Bowl mix this season. Peter Bukowski with Locked On Packers breaks down the chances in a tough NFC North.
We're going to talk about the best case scenario for the Packers, the worst case scenario for the Packers, and the middle road scenario for the Packers. Not everything goes right, but not everything goes wrong. And last year, they were probably walking that middle road until Denver. And that's when everything really changed for them because they lose Zach Tom and Micah Parsons in the same game. And the team is just not the same after that, not even close to the same. And the beauty of this team is they don't need everything to go right. We saw last year. And look, I am a parody of myself at this point, but pointing out 9-3-1 in Denver with a 2-score lead when you lose your most important trench player on offense and defense. And the defensive one is one of the 3 best defensive players in the NFL, probably one of the 5 best total players in the NFL. So if everything goes right, let's start there. Micah Parsons is on the early end of that timeline. So let's say he comes back week 5, week 6. The offensive line is what the Packers think it is. You get a first-round pick in Jordan Morgan, and he plays like a first-round pick. You get a second-round pick in Anthony Belton, and he plays like a second-round pick. Sean Ryan plays like a guy worthy of a 3-year extension at starter-level money. And you get a clearly upgraded offensive line. Now, we have to deal in reasonable scenarios here. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect this Packers offensive line to be elite. We have not, it's possible Jordan Morgan is an all-pro left tackle. It's possible Anthony Belton is an all-pro right guard. We just don't have any evidence that that's the case. So projecting that even in a best case scenario, we need to be reasonable. Yeah, okay, in a best case scenario, Christian Watson and Matthew Golden are both all pros, and Lucas Van Ness becomes Trey Hendrickson. And we could do that, if we're playing Madden, but I don't think that's useful for these sorts of discussions, right? So what the Packers are going to look like if reasonably everything goes right for them. Now, reasonably everything going right involves being healthy. So Zach Tom stays healthy, Marshawn Lloyd stays healthy, Josh Jacobs stays healthy, Christian Watson stays healthy, Matthew Golden, Tucker Kraft, Zach Tom, all the guys that were hurt last year stay pretty healthy or mostly healthy. To get your high-end outcomes, that's where you have to get to, right? And that's true for every team. The Seahawks don't win if Gray Zabel does not play in the playoffs, and Devin Witherspoon doesn't play in the playoffs, and JSN doesn't play in the playoffs. They might not even make the playoffs if they have to play half a season without JSN, or they have to play half a season, or really the whole season without Gray Zabel. Or in the playoffs, they lose Devin Witherspoon or Nick Eamon-Warry. The Rams were too good. The margins are that small. And so the Packers they're going to need their guys healthy, right? They're also going to need Matt LaFleur to be the guy that we saw in the second half of last year, to stay aggressive, 4th down calls. And I do think there is reasons for optimism there. Matt LaFleur seem to change on Thanksgiving. And, I feel a little bit like a Netflix show where they have to repeat the things, the dialogue, and they have to repeat the plot over and over because everyone's second screening and they're not paying attention. But like, not everyone listens to every episode. And so some of these things have to get repeated. But there was a change in the way that he called games starting on Thanksgiving. And we didn't get to see that fully bear out over the course of the season because Jordan Love gets hurt in the Bears game and then doesn't play in the Ravens game, and then they sit him at the end of the season. But in the playoffs, they have a chance to kick a field goal late in the first half to make it a 3-score game, and they go for it on 4th down instead, and they get a touchdown. And those are the moments. Like there is the old adage about adversity builds character, and then there's the counter adage, which is no adversity reveals character. It doesn't build character. In that moment, Matt LaFleur had the opportunity to regress, to revert to a more conservative version of himself. That we've seen, right? And he didn't. He stayed aggressive. So I think there is good reason to believe this is going to continue, but until we see it happen, we can't be sure. Part of the upside scenario here is that the streamlining of the receivers goes exactly the way that we've laid it out here. That having all the pieces fit, you add a little luxury item in the Savion Williams. He's the cherry on top of this offense. But Christian Watson, Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, they fit really nicely together. You add in Tucker Kraft, a beautiful fit as a yak player, as someone who can play in line, as someone who can be split out wide, can do a lot of the dirty work for you, but also in a game where he could go off for 150, he does, right? As long as he's healthy. Well, in this outcome, he's healthy. And then if Micah Parsons comes back, week 5, week 6, that mitigates whatever questions you have with this secondary. And really, if you look at the structure of this defense, if you're going to set up a plan for trying to hide your corners, you'd probably do a couple things. Ideally, you'd have an elite pass rush. Well, the Packers made strides in that regard in the offseason. Micah Parsons is going to get back at some point. They added Javon Hargrave. They added Zaire Franklin, who isn't just someone who can be used as a blitzer, though he can, but what he can do is be a solid player that allows you to use, say, Edgerrin Cooper more as a blitzer. Lucas Van Ness is healthy. So you'd bolster that pass rush, which the Packers are doing. You'd have elite safety play. Like one of the reasons why 2024, without the elite pass rush, the Packers were able to still have a very good defense was their safety play was impeccable. Evan Williams, Xavier McKinney, you add in Javon Bullard, they were excellent. And they played some more cover 2 and they hid their corners a little bit. I think we're going to see some of that stuff this year from Jonathan Gannon. But then the other piece of that is in Jonathan Gannon's defense, there's going to be coverage disguises. There's going to be creative personnel deployment. And they're going to play plenty of 2 high to try and not give up big plays. So you're hiding your corners a little bit in that way. And so all of that stuff is what the Packers are doing. If you're going to have a situation where your corners are not going to matter that much, or at least your flaws there are not going to kill you, this is the structure that you'd want. Now, in the high-end set of scenarios too, what you have is someone like Carrington Valentine catching the ball. The Packers had plenty of opportunities last year to get turnovers, and they just could not secure the ball. If Carrington Valentine had just caught the passes thrown at him, at his body, that hit his hands or hit his chest, he might have led the league in interceptions. Like he must have had 8 plays that he will tell you he absolutely should have made. Like he had 3 just in the Giants game that either hit his hands or hit his chest. He could have been a Pro Bowler based on those stats. He's a solid player. I've always liked Carrington Valentine. He's got to catch the ball. And so in this upside scenario, he does. And that team is as good as any team in the NFC. That version of the Packers can beat anybody in the NFL. That version of the Packers can win the Super Bowl.
Workplace chaos can show up fast. The problem is that finding the right candidate can take a lot more time than most businesses can afford. That's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. Finding the right person can make all the difference, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. Some of the best moves organizations make aren't always the splashiest ones. Sometimes it's finding the person who fits exactly what the team needs at the right moment. That's what stood out to me here, and it's the same idea behind Indeed Sponsored Jobs, helping connect organizations with candidates who are the right fit from the start. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your premium status you deserve at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Welcome back to the Big 3-30 NFL. Drake May and the Patriots feel slighted, disrespected, underrated, whatever words you want to put on it, after ESPN's FPI put them in the middle of the pack in the league. Nick Cattles with Locked On Patriots makes his complaints.
Apparently, 2025 in this past offseason meant nothing to a certain prediction model. The Pats, to me, when you look at them on paper, which is all we can do in June, if you look at them on paper, the Patriots are a contender in the AFC. But ESPN's Football Power Index rankings came out a couple weeks ago, post the A.J. Brown trade, and the FPI disagreed with what I just said. The Football Power Index of ESPN has the Patriots ranked 14th in the NFL. Pretty much middle of the pack. They have the Patriots as the 7th best team in the AFC. So number 14 in the NFL, number 7 in the AFC. Mike Reese wrote about that over the past couple of weeks here. Here's what he wrote. A top takeaway was low expectations for the Patriots. They are not favored to win the AFC East and have a 6.7% chance to get back to the Super Bowl, a 2.7% chance to win it. Now, look, playoff runs depend on a lot of unknowns. So I'm not going to sit here and lose my mind about, oh, the Patriots have less than a 7% chance to get to the Super Bowl, and they have less than a 3% chance to win the Super Bowl. When you talk about getting to the postseason, a lot depends on who you're playing, where you're playing, are you healthy, and what kind of weather are you going to have to deal with? All of that is unknown. But when we think about this regular season, we think about where the Patriots should be slotted in the AFC. They should, no doubt, in my mind, no doubt be favored to win the AFC East. And I know Josh Allen and a lot of national talking heads will sit there and tell you Josh Allen this, Josh Allen that. Josh Allen always gives the Buffalo Bills the edge. Well, Josh Allen did not give them the edge last year. The Patriots won the AFC East in 2025, and Drake May is taking steps to get closer to Josh Allen. Now, I know you could argue and say, well, Drake May finished as the runner-up to the MVP, and Josh Allen did not. So Drake May is already ahead of Josh Allen. I would disagree. I have to look at the totality, and I have to look at what Josh Allen has done in the NFL for several years. It was a fantastic season in 2025 for Drake May, but you want to see him take that next step as defenses adjust to him, adjust to the Patriots offense. What does Drake May do to respond to that? But I would also argue that Drake May is getting closer and closer to the Josh Allen level. And if Drake May has another really good season in 2026, he becomes part of the perennial conversation, the perennial MVP conversation. So the quarterback, to me, the difference between Josh Allen and Drake May is much smaller right now in 2026 than it was getting ready for the 2025 season. Then I look at head coach. Mike Vrabel versus a rookie head coach in Joe Brady. Joe Brady, this is his first year as a head coach. He did not, take that job in college. He was an offensive coordinator in college, offensive coordinator in the NFL. Mike Vrabel is one of the best coaches in the league. Patriots have a clear advantage at head coach. Offense versus offense. Even though the Bills have Josh Allen, I still think the Patriots offense with A.J. Brown, Romeo Doubs, the two-headed monster in the backfield, the offensive line they've put together, Hunter Henry at tight end, I would still put the Patriots offense ahead of the Buffalo Bills. Now, it might be slightly ahead, but I would have the Patriots offense ahead of the Bills offense. And I would also give the Patriots the slight edge on defense. So when we look at the division, I would say the Patriots should be favored to win the AFC East. I also think the Patriots being 7th in the conference in this model is straight up disrespectful. It's ridiculous. I mean, look at some of the teams that are ahead of the Patriots. The Kansas City Chiefs. Now, you go back 2 or 3 years ago, of course you have that argument. Of course, nobody would beef with the idea of the Kansas City Chiefs being ahead of the Patriots in a preseason ranking. But when you look at the Chiefs now, in their current iteration, to have the Chiefs 4th overall in the AFC, to me, that's borderline crazy. Rashee Rice, their number 1 receiver, literally just got out of prison. Travis Kelce, if he's not washed, he is on the 18th hole and on the green of the 18th hole. He's, for all intents and purposes, staring down the barrel of his football mortality. I don't think any of us would expect Travis Kelce to have a 75-catch season out of nowhere. I do not see that type of season for Kelce in 2026. 76 catches last year. I think he takes a drop back. I think he ends up catching, I don't know, maybe 60, 65 at the most. But Travis Kelce, no doubt, on the back end of his career. Patrick Mahomes coming back from an ACL. Now, of course, ACLs are different in 26 than they were in 2016. You can come back from ACLs much quicker. We just saw Stephon Diggs last year recover from an ACL and do what he did. But your starting quarterback is still coming back from an ACL. He's now in his 30s. I have questions about their cornerback position outside of Mansour Delane, who they drafted in April. So I think the Chiefs being at 4 is a reach. I also would question the Texans being ahead of the Patriots. Now, I do think the Texans are a really good football team. But how on God's green earth could you put the Texans ahead of the Patriots after what we saw from C.J. Stroud last postseason? How in the world? He was that bad. Now, yeah, he's better in the regular season. But after watching what happened to C.J. Stroud in the postseason, would it surprise anybody if he didn't have a great year in 2026? So I don't know how you put the Texans ahead of the Patriots, given the quarterback. I think the Patriots, looking at the Pats versus the rest of this conference, I think the Pats are right there on paper with the Broncos, the Chargers, the Bengals. You might argue the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Patriots, I would not slot them any lower than 4th or 5th in the AFC. And 5th feels like a little bit of a reach to me. 7th? 7th is disrespectful. 14th after going to the Super Bowl last year and improving your roster with a staff that has stayed together with a quarterback that should take that next step. 14th in the NFL, barely above the middle of the pack. Disrespectful, man. Disrespectful.
The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. That's what makes tournament soccer so exciting from the opening whistle to the final kick. Now FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals mean more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. That's what I love about these tournaments. You can turn on a match between teams you don't normally follow, and suddenly one goal changes everything. The tension builds so quickly that you're invested before you even realize it, and now you get to benefit from each goal scored. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com now to get started. Welcome back to the Big 3 in 30. Rashawn Gary and Donovan Eziraku give the Cowboys' defensive front the power to dominate games this season, or at least that's the plan in Dallas. Marcus Mosher and Landon McCool get more into it on Locked On Cowboys.
We are previewing the defensive tackle position for the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about some rookies and sleepers to keep an eye on, some key veterans that are going to have some big roles on this defense. But Landon, we have to start with Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark, the two defensive tackles that the Cowboys acquired via trade last year. Now it's a completely new defense for them. It's going from Matt Eberflus to Christian Parker. They're going to be doing more gap and a half stuff up front. Do you think this scheme change is beneficial for Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think what it does is it features the defensive tackles, and I think that's part of the appeal for what this front office was looking for when they were kind of shopping, I guess, for new defensive coordinators and new defenses to play with. I just point out real quick. I mean, when we did this exercise, a year ago, and I would assume that we would have done it before because the Micah Parsons trade happened after training camp. Mm-hmm. This was a very different exercise, right? Like as far as where the quality of this team was. And I think that, it's interesting to kind of go from the kind of undersized, purely one gap, get up the field quickly system to sort of a hybrid front where you've got two extremely talented defensive tackles now that you feel good about. I think, the system, as is going to be multiple. So there's going to be lots of different types of opportunities. There's definitely going to be obviously a lot of gap in the half, like we talked about. That certainly will be likely what they're playing on early downs at certain points, but there's also going to be opportunities for them on third downs in pass rushing situations to kind of, really pin back their ears and be pass rushers. And that's where I expect that they're going to get kind of even more opportunities to shine as pass rushers, maybe even more than they did last year.
I'm not really worried about Quinnen Williams. I think, I mean, I've seen enough of him now at Alabama and with multiple coaching staffs with the Jets. Like, he is such a good player that you could play him anywhere, and I think he's going to be fine. Now, do I think there are schemes where he could be better than others? Yeah, of course. But I think Christian Parker's really smart, and I think he's going to design a defense that could really feature him. He's the guy that they gave up all this draft capital for. I think he's going to be the guy they give a bunch of money to. We haven't talked about this, by the way, but Jeffrey Simmons signed a contract extension over the weekend that's paying him $35 million per year on average. I'm sure the Cowboys will be doing something similar soon with Quinnen. But I'm just not that concerned. Like, he can be an awesome run defender. If you need him to be like the best run defending defensive tackle in the league, he can do that. If you need him to be a awesome pass rusher, he obviously can do that as well. I'm not concerned. I'm a little bit more concerned for Kenny Clark, but not so much so that like we should be panicking about this at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to use those players to their strengths. And for Quinnen, like, this is the defense that he played in college. I mean, this is what Saban was running basically when he was in college. So I really don't think it's going to be like a mismatch of fit. And again, I think that the defense is so versatile with their fronts, like, that you can play like they said, a 3-down front with 4-man structures, and like you can still line these guys up in odd and even fronts, and there's going to be a little bit of each. There's going to be a little bit of everything. So if anything, that the defense is so multiple, and Quinnen and Kenny Clark are such a key part of what they want to do, that they're going to be a fit because the defense is going to fit around them. If anything, like, they're going to make it, make it such that they're fitting into these fronts in a way that aligning in these fronts in a way that's comfortable for them to make plays.
I just look at like what Philadelphia has done the last couple of years where, Jalen Carter's playing at an all pro level. Jordan Davis got better each year that he played. Milton Williams was on the Super Bowl winning team and then got a boatload of money in free agency. And those are three very different defensive tackles where Milton Williams is the 280-pound penetrating type. Jordan Davis is your freak athlete at 330 pounds. And Jalen Carter is probably the most similar to Quinnen Williams in terms of a guy that can stop the run and rush the passer. We saw Vic Fangio find ways to utilize all three of those players. I would assume Christian Parker is going to do the same with what he has.
Yeah, and this isn't Eagles talk, but even down to Ojimo and guys like that. I mean, they have found ways to make guys incredibly valuable in that defense, and I think again, like they knew, the Cowboys knew what their assets were when they were going into the season. They knew where their talent was. Their talent lied at defensive tackle, and even down to the point where they had 3 defensive tackles. So when at the time when and we'll talk about in a second because I actually do like him, but at the time we still had 3 guys that we thought were top end of the NFL defensive tackles, and this was still the defense that they chose. So I think. Right. The idea is for them to feature these players. That's why I think it will be a good fit for them.
One more thing on Quinnen before we move to some of the key backups and reserve players. I part of me believes that this could be the best year we've ever seen from Quinnen for a couple of different reasons. He's in a defense that I think is going to be very beneficial to him. It's his second year in Dallas. It's first full offseason in Dallas. And you just listen to him talk and how motivated he is. Yeah. I think he really wants to be on a team that's winning. I mean, he came from an Alabama program that I think lost 1 or 2 games the entire time he was there. With the Jets, he never played in a playoff game, very few primetime games. And it just seems like if you look at like the history of defensive tackles around the league, most of them have like arguably their best season at age 27, 28, 29. And we're kind of right in that sweet spot for Quinnen where he still is incredibly quick, but he's got the power. He's got the technique down. I'm just not ruling out a chance that we haven't seen the best football yet from Quinnen Williams.
We spent quite a bit of this segment talking about Quinnen Williams. I agree with you. I'm going to take some time real quick to talk about Kenny Clark because we are going to run out of issues here. And I think the thing with Kenny Clark, when you pair him next to Quinnen Williams, I think I was going to predict a very similar thing where we've seen some incredible years from Kenny Clark over the years. And he is, at the tail end of his career to a certain degree. But I also think that I don't know that there's been a time when he's played next to a player like Quinnen Williams. So I think that having these two guys next to each other is going to produce opportunities that neither of them have had for a while. I think both of them have played on quality defensive lines at certain points throughout their career. I don't know that they've either one of them have had a guy like the other next to them in a situation like this. So I'm really excited to see how those two players kind of play off each other combined with the other group, the guys in the group.
It's funny that you should mention that about Kenny Clark because I was actually doing some research today. I mean, and it's undoubtable that Quinnen Williams is the best player that Kenny Clark has ever played with on the defensive line, not just defensive tackles, but overall. And now you're going to be putting those guys next to each other. I think when they're on the field, you're going to see two guys that can really generate a pass rush. And if you can get some quality edge play, guys that can stop the run, and we think Rashawn Gary and Donovan Ezra-Rocker are going to be able to do that, you might not need to devote a ton of guys, up to stopping the run. You might be able to keep 6-7 guys into coverage on every single snap. And that's how you can become a really good and balanced defense on early downs.
That's all for today's Big 3 in 30 NFL. If you follow basketball or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NBA and on campus going up every week just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA or the Big 3 in 30 college wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 in 30 NFL.